Hello, welcome to Time Capsules. I'm Carl Qualls, Professor of History at Dickinson College. We've constructed this video series to illuminate some moments in European history. For my students, this series serves as a backdrop to our class discussions, but all viewers are welcome, and we hope that you too will enjoy unearthing the past. Most people would say that modern means something that is recent, up to date, or technologically advanced. But scholars have a more complex and specific definition. Is eugenics modern? What about a government reading a soldier's mail in World War I, or a late 19th century census? If you answered no to any of these questions, you need to join me for a short introduction on how historians understand the term modernity, particularly as it relates to modern state practices. The traditional definition of modernity points to liberal democracy and industrial capitalism, and the resulting urbanization and literacy. I prefer a broader and less normative definition from historian David Hoffman. That is the, quote, spread of bureaucracy and state control, efforts to manage and mobilize the population, scientism and attempts to rationalize and categorize society, and the rise of mass politics. This broader definition allows us to move beyond Western European case studies. The aim of the modern state was to transform or to manage and mobilize the population by developing a welfare state. Near the beginning of the 20th century, states began to assert progressive social intervention as part of the shift from managing a territory to managing population as a resource for state strength and vitality. Military and economic competition and imperial conquest necessitated specialist training and strong and healthy bodies for war, industry, and childbearing. The need to transform the population led to state-funded projects to improve public education, health, nutrition, and much more. It also led to pronatalist policies that rewarded women for having many kids, taxed bachelors, and made abortion and divorce illegal. Developing a welfare state and controlling the population necessitated an ever-enlarging bureaucracy. Governments began to be staffed by legions of specialists, from economists and statisticians to urban planners and public health officials. Specialists and policies were increasingly based on science and reason. Scientism and attempts to rationalize, organize, and categorize society, politics, and the economy now became central to larger and more centralized national governments. World War I showed governments the importance of planning and greater state control of resources. This led to more state planning of the economy and more attempts to intervene in society for the perceived greater good. Science became a source of legitimacy as secularism began to spread in the 19th century, and scientific discoveries suggested the perfectibility of humanity. Faith in reason and the veneration of science began to replace faith in an unknowable and unseen God. If people could understand a problem scientifically, humans could intervene to improve their condition. This led to a rise in statistics, from census to public health data, and so much more, as a way to know, categorize, and organize people and resources. Once popular sovereignty gained greater hold following the French Revolution, and monarchs no longer made decisions for us, citizens had to be involved in the process of governmental policies if those policies were to be viewed as legitimate. This meant that leaders had to invoke the people, or the masses, even in the absence of pure democracy. This led to the rise of mass politics. Mass politics had to take place on a mass scale, be visual, employ myths to galvanize the population, and transform and mobilize the consciousness of the population. Propaganda posters, literacy campaigns, mass marches, and demonstration marked a participatory but non-democratic form of politics. But even in the parliamentary democracies, governments and other institutions use modern media in very similar ways to change public opinion and behavior. We need only look at the Prohibition campaign in the United States or the cult film Reefer Madness, both highly influenced by religious groups, to see examples of attempts to control behavior in a democratic system. With the rapid and unprecedented mobility of the Industrial Revolution and the First World War, traditions were undermined and the potential for social and political upheaval increased. Women, workers, minority groups, and the underclasses, much more generally, posed potential threats domestically as much as increasingly militarized countries did internationally. Governments began to craft messages and adopt policies for ensuring social stability, economic prosperity, and the general health and welfare of the population that increasingly came to be seen as resources for factories and armies. This meant positive growth in public health and education to improve quality of life and mind. However, the darker side of such benefits were social control and diminution of basic rights. A focus on medicine and the washing of hands and clothes, for example, was intimately bound up in eugenics for the health of the nation. Promoting the increase in positive bodies as workers, mothers, and soldiers, while restricting the propagation of diseased and harmful bodies through sterilization and even murder. Schools enlightened the mind, but universal education was just as much about taking children and youth, no longer allowed in factories and mines, off the streets and into schools where they could be surveilled, controlled, and indoctrinated with the virtues of citizenship and heavy doses of nationalism. How many of you had to say the Pledge of Allegiance every morning or sing the national anthem at school events? The focus on public health was part of a larger eugenic movement. Positive eugenics provides public health services for healthy populations and pro-natalist incentives to increase the birth rate. However, today we generally discuss negative eugenics, like mass sterilizations, which were not limited to Nazi Germany. Sweden and the United States engaged in forced and coerced sterilization for many decades longer than Hitler's regime. This was population management on a mass scale. Let's look at just a few examples to show how many of the characteristics above fit together. Population management became the be-all and end-all for modern states. With the new god of science, physicians, economists, social workers, urban planners, and many other specialists counted, categorized, and mapped populations so that resources could be directed toward them to order, cultivate, administer, and otherwise improve them. Although this welfare state developed at different times and in different ways in different countries, it sought to act on the mind and body of individual citizens. This took the form of sickness insurance, more wide-ranging health services, compulsory state education, workplace protections like minimum wages, maximum hours, and safety inspections. And in more extreme cases, it even included free and subsidized leisure and vacations. Just as algorithms are today directing much of our lives, over 100 years ago, statistics served not only to count, but also to conceptualize and solve problems. Often problems that had not previously been viewed as problems. Is a Netflix algorithm really necessary for us to be entertained? Once statistics or algorithms are employed to count and conceptualize, new knowledge is created which can then be acted upon or monetized. That can mean tracking case 0 of an Ebola outbreak, and thus determining quarantine and treatment options. Or it can mean police racially profiling and the murder of unarmed black men. Again, these are two sides of the same coin. One prevents death, the other leads to unwarranted deaths. Both are part of the desire to perfect humanity, eliminating disease and crime respectively, through data, which creates new knowledge and actions. If we take the example of public health, we can see all the elements of modern state practices. What if Ebola or Zika started spreading rapidly across the United States today? We have a bureaucracy, like the Centers for Disease Control, staffed by specialists who use science and reason to categorize and recommend solutions. Other parts of the bureaucracy then mobilize to quarantine, inoculate, create public service announcements, which are not unlike propaganda, which leads to mass mobilization. We are then told that our public officials and our tax dollars were essential in bringing the health crisis to a resolution. We are now participants in that mass political process. Perhaps we are even moved to volunteer our time and skills, or we donate to the Red Cross or some other agency. And why all of this attention to public health? To save the national body. Sick or dead citizens cannot be productive workers, soldiers, or mothers, threatening the national economy and national security. Now bear with me. Let's compare this to the Holocaust. Mass murder of an entire group of people was not merely the wish fulfilled of a crazed madman. Hitler simply becomes the comforting symbol for us, so that we do not have to recognize that everyday people, including highly educated professors, biologists, economists, public health officials, and physicians, made the Holocaust happen. Everyday humans created a most inhumane program, and much of the foundation predated the Nazis. Eugenics in Europe and North America at the turn of the century had already deemed some people unfit. These were determinations by philosophers, scientists, and other rational specialists. Their goal was progressive intervention to improve the national or human body. The Nazis brought their bureaucracy, including orphanages, hospitals, concentration camps, railroad officials, and more, into this policy of state control. From their assumption that Jews were dangerous, either as vectors of disease, as rapacious moneylenders, or by mixing blood through sex, would weaken the Aryan population. Therefore, to use sociologist Zygmunt Bauman's image of the gardening state, Nazi officials decided that they had to remove the weed from the garden so that Aryan roots could grow stronger. Jews and others murdered during the Holocaust were counted, categorized, and acted upon by a state looking for control, not unlike our public health example above. The population was mobilized through mass rallies, radio speeches, posters, and more to participate as denouncers or killers. The rationalization of the problem and the quest for efficiency moved from individually injecting handicapped children, which was known as the T4 program, to gassing them in the back of a truck. This allowed the extermination of Jews to shift from shooting each one in the back of the head to the gas chambers of the death camps. The efficient and industrialized killing was scientific, but it was also justified economically and humanely. It was cheaper to kill en masse in a gas chamber, and it was more humane to the killers, not the killed, because repeatedly shooting people at point-blank range was causing psychological trauma to many members of the Einsatzgruppen. Thus, the gas chambers were protecting the Aryan Garden in two ways. It was eliminating the weed, while also lessening the psychological damage to perpetrators so that they could remain healthy and grow. Now, is a Zika outbreak equivalent to the Holocaust? As scholar Wolfgang Schivelbusch put it so nicely, to compare is not the same as to equate. Of course they're not the same. But if we examine modern state practice, we can find in democracies and homicidal dictatorships all the same elements of bureaucracy, state control, scientism, and mass politics. The modern state is not inherently good or bad. Dictatorships and democracies both sought to fulfill the progressive quest for perfection. People in positions of power, be they politicians, military officers, economists, physicians, or teachers, make decisions and policies that limit the rights of individuals in return for the service to the state. The careful historian needs to be able to see the forest and the trees. We need to see elements that can be compared while at the same time recognizing how and why situations diverge.